All right, so again, welcome to the Behind the Belly Button Epigenetics class. This is our fourth in the series. If you are joining us here, having had the first first three classes, wonderful. You'll hear a little bit of review, but don't worry, there's lots more info here in the class. If you have not actually attended any of the other classes, that is absolutely fine. We'll catch you up, and then I'll also point you to where you can learn more and do a little bit of a deeper dive. So why did we create this series? I wanted to provide a little context. Often when we think of the digestive tract and digestion, our gut, we think of this just digestion, right? But it's actually just the beginning of a lot of complex functions in the human body. And a healthy gut impacts nutrient absorption, hormones, our immune system, emotions, hunger, and DNA, our genetics. So this whole series is designed to kind of shed some light on how these puzzle pieces work together to essentially form a healthier us. So these classes are not actually a wellness learning series. We hope to bring those back soon. So you're going to benefit from having watched videos of the previous classes, but they're not a requirement for completion at all. So the first class that we did was digestion and nutrient absorption, and we took a closer look at how digestion works to break down the food that we eat into usable forms of energy and vitamins and minerals, and also how our body absorbs them and carries them to the organs that we need. Now, in gut health, we explored how the gut is actually our second brain, and it affects and is affected by what we eat, how we feel emotionally, and as well as other health factors. In our third class, the microbiome, we explored even further the ecosystem in our gut. So we've got friendly bacteria and parasites, and they're actually playing a very important role in emotional health and disease prevention. We've got billions of bacteria. They contain 90% of our genetic material. So in this class, we cover pre and probiotics and the foods that support a healthy gut. But today we're going to be delving into more of the genetic component of that microbiome, which is our fourth class, epigenetics. And then our final class, hunger, is coming in June, and we'll discuss a variety of ways and how we can sort of identify the types of hunger we experience. So we experience hunger for different reasons, and some of them are actually emotional triggers or environmental triggers where we're not actually hungry for food. So we'll learn about the different ways our body and brain experience those hunger pangs, and then how we kind of strategize and move forward and decide whether we eat, what we eat, and how we eat. So, all right. So today we're going to do an introduction, brief review of the gut function. We'll explore the genetic and epigenetic component of our gut, and how within epigenetics, how our genes are expressed, as well as how our nutrition affects gene expression. And then also we'll touch a little bit on research and kind of what's going on in the research community on gut health. So when we think about our gut in daily life, perhaps you might not even notice how much we incorporate or rely on the gut. So we might say things like, I have a gut instinct or gut feeling or gut reaction. You may experience butterflies in your stomach or have a sinking feeling in your stomach. So, these are all physiological responses in the gut, but very closely tied in with our emotions and really rooted in science, because the experience and the feelings that we identify in our daily life are part of our gut health and so much more. So this is really new and exciting science. I want you to keep that in mind as we go through this, because I'll be sharing things that we know, but we don't know a lot. So even things that we know, perhaps they might learn more. This science has been around for several decades, but in the big scope of things in science. That's a very new science. So gut health is important, not to digestion, but immunity, brain and heart health, has ties with obesity, emotional well-being, cancers and other diseases, autoimmune disorders, skin conditions, allergies, endocrine disorders. So this is just a short list. I can really just go on, but I think the message that we're driving home here is that our gut is not just for digestion. It's really important for every other aspect for us. Now, as we look at genes today in our gut today, we want to understand that this is all part of the larger picture and everything is connected. So as we want to have a physically and mentally healthy body and to experience quality of life, we want to successfully manage and be mindful of multiple factors. They're all interconnected. So when one is out of balance, we might experience poor health in a variety of ways or tip the other out of balance as well. So because this is a class about gut health, we discuss so much more, but I kind of put it here in the middle. I'll give you an example about mental well-being. So we've learned that microbes in our gut actually produce 50% of the dopamine and serotonin found in the body, whereas previously we might think that that's all produced in the brain, right? Those are the feel-good hormones that affect our mood and pleasure. Well, it turns out half of those are produced in the gut. So you can see how obviously these are connected, right? We also produce some melatonin in our gut, so that can impact sleep. If we have poor sleep, we're going to experience a potentially more stress, perhaps reduced gut health, etc. So you can see how these are all interrelated. All right, a brief overview of our digestive tract. If you'd like to know more, please watch our class recorded, available on the Wellness Classes webpage. So for our purposes here, we're just going to get a lay of the land here. Let's look at what the digestive tract looks like so you kind of know where we are. Right here in this area, this is our stomach, and then everything that we ingest, liquids as well as food products, go right here. This is the small intestine here, these purple squiggly parts, and it's actually, if unraveled, over 20 feet long, and if opened up, the area of a tennis court, actually. And here we have our lower intestine, the large intestine, and the waste is then excreted through the body. So now what happens is when we consume food and beverages, you can see just how complex this process might be just by the sheer surface area and volume and length of the digestive tract, right? Pretty impressive. So this is where there are some nutrients that are formed in this region. We have many nutrients that are broken down in this area. And this is essentially where we're talking about our digestive tract and our gut health. When we talk about bacteria and parasites and our genetic material, we're talking about this area here. Okay, so the brain, the gut, and this as your second brain. So every time we think, feel, or perform a multitude of unconscious processes, we have 100 billion brain cells in our skull that conduct electrical signals to communicate every single part of the body via the vagus nerve. It is the most complex, essential, and identifiable organ in the body, and it acts as the center of our nervous system, But what if how you think and feel isn't just controlled by the brain and the central nervous system, but in fact, a second brain? Well, the gut is actually our second brain. It is so significant, it actually has its own nervous system called the enteric nervous system, and it can actually function on its own even if the vagus nerve is severed. So here we have our gut-brain axis, and they communicate with one another through the superhighway of its own specialized nerve cells and transmitters. So the enteric nervous system is actually capable of organizing and initiating its own reflexes for digestion, because it has its own complex collection of these neurons and isn't relying on the brain to do so. And it controls a lot more than we may realize. So in addition to our heart, lungs, and vocal cords, the brain communicates with the digestive tract. Now, given the importance of the brain, we would think that the majority of the signals that generate in the brain would speak to the gut. But actually, scientists have noted that 80 to 90% of the nerve fibers in the enteric nervous system are actually going from the gut and the brain. If you think about that for a second, that's pretty critical, right? Because now we're starting to really understand just how critical of a role the gut plays. So if you'd like a deeper understanding of this, I encourage you to watch the gut health webinar. We also include the foods that we need for proper nutrition and diet to encourage a healthy gut. So within that gut, we've got our ecosystem, which is extremely unique. We have what is called our microbiome, which consists of trillions of parasites and microbes and many, many different strains of bacteria. In addition to these bugs, our overwhelming majority of our genes, our DNA, lives in the microbiome more than any other organ. And it's so significant, our microbiome actually weighs about 3 pounds. That's a lot of, parasites and bacteria. Don't worry. They're hopefully mostly good, right? For optimal health and well-being, the microbiome should have more bacteria than bad and more diversity in the bacterial strains. The healthier the body, when we experience a varied flora in the gut health. Now, all of us are really unique. We're like little snowflakes. We have our own microbiome footprint, and that is to a certain degree driven initially by our genetics, but also exposure to a lot of different things, our environment, the food we eat, where we live, where we go to school, etc. So key takeaway here is good bacteria is very good health, diverse bacteria is even, better health. And that ecosystem is not just static. It can be affected by diet, right? So if we put good food in, that support our gut health, support production of healthy bacteria, we have a much happier ecosystem, microbiome, than when we don't feed it the right foods or foods that promote bad bacteria growth. Our genes play a role, even the types of medication. Very simple example is antibiotics, right? Antibiotics are designed to kill all bacteria. So while we want them to kill the bad bacteria, they're also going to kill the good bacteria, which is why we want to be careful and not over experience, I guess, or take antibiotics too often. And then, of course, our environment. Toxins in the water, air pollution, these are all going to make an impact on our microbiome. Okay, so let's explore genetics versus genomics. That's just kind of a baseline here. So when we talk about genetics, we're talking about the study of genes and the way that our traits and our conditions are passed down from one generation to the next. When we talk about genomics, genomics is the study of all of our DNA in all of that are living in our genome. So our DNA is, think about that as the information to build and maintain an organism. So sort of like an operating manual for cell growth. What kind of cells are going to develop? Are they going to be muscle cells or heart cells or brain cells? And also what types of cells are going to grow, proliferate or not, right? So here we have what's called the double helix. This might take you back to biology where we all learned about DNA. This is a twisted strand here with very unique to all of us. variations of proteins. Now, the DNA sequences themselves do not change. What does change is how our body reads that DNA sequence. Okay, so this is really fascinating stuff once we get into epigenetics and our epigenome. So here in epigenetics, this is how we look at behaviors and the environment and how they can cause changes in how genes work. Remember, our genes are not going to change, but we can sort of alter how they work, how genes are expressed. Now, the term epi means above. So let's look at our DNA helix, right? This right here on the left is our helix. And here's epigenetics. Here's our gene, right? Same gene. And above, you will find that these are epigenetic marks or tags that actually give DNA instructions on what to do. So at the very earliest onset, we're going to have markers for DNA to turn into liver cells, brain cells, etc. Now, when we talk about epigenetics and lifestyle in response to environment, these tags are actually reversible. So the DNA sequence itself does not change, but epigenetic tags are actually going to change how the body reads that sequence. And I think what is the most fascinating about this is that we really try to understand, this really draws and hits home for us, you know, when we talk about lifestyle and changing your lifestyle and eating better and exercise and maybe drinking more water. Here it is, like, here's the proof here. This is actually what happens in our bodies for that to make a difference in our own health. Okay, let's watch a short video here. It briefly explains the epigenome and it gives you kind of a nice picture of moving parts.
DNA contains the instructions for building all the parts of the body. But DNA is only half the story. The DNA in our bodies is wrapped around proteins called histones. Both the DNA and histones are covered with chemical tags. This second layer of structure is called the epigenome. The epigenome shapes the physical structure of the genome. It tightly wraps inactive genes, making them unreadable. It relaxes active genes, making them easily accessible. Different sets of genes are active in different cell types. The DNA code remains fixed for life, but the epigenome is flexible. Epigenetic tags react to signals from the outside world, such as diet and stress. The epigenome adjusts specific genes in our genomic landscape in response to our rapidly changing environment.
Okay, great. So gene expression and how epigenomes change. Epigenetics, as you saw in the short video, the tags can actually turn certain genes on and off, and we do have some control, like environment. Our epigenetic tags are going to change depending on what life cycle we're in and what life stage. We do the most development of our epigenome and growth of our epigenome, obviously, very early in life, within the first several years. And again, we can change those epigenetic markers through life based on some of our lifestyle choices and what we're exposed to. So I think identical twins are actually a really fascinating study in how epigenetics work, because it's such a clear representation that our genetic inheritance is not set in stone, but rather that we have some control of our own health and that of our future generations. So keep in mind that when we're talking about identical twins, it's one egg that splits into two, which means there are two embryos with the exact same DNA. So let's see what happens here.
Identical twins are genetic carbon copies. The DNA sequences of their genes are exactly the same. Yet physically, identical twins become increasingly different over time. Why is this so? Genes provide the instructions for the development and maintenance of the body. Yet a second set of instructions, known as the epigenome, interacts with DNA to activate or suppress the expression of particular genes. Certain chemicals, known as epigenetic tags, turn genes off or on without changing the underlying genetic code. During fertilization, one set of chromosomes from dad and one set of chromosomes from mum are combined to form an embryo. Epigenetic tags are erased from mum and dad's chromosomes during the first days after fertilization. However, on some genes, the tags remain. These are known as imprinted genes. Identical twins result when a single embryo splits in two. Each embryo has the same genome and the same epigenome. As the embryos develop, cells differentiate into distinct types such as bone, muscle, and skin. As each type specializes, epigenetic tags activate and silence specific genes, leading the cells to specialize further. Each cell type gradually takes on a unique epigenetic profile. Because the twins share the same environment, their epigenomes are very similar at birth and through the early years of life. As the twins age, their environments begin to differ. Their genomes remain the same, but signals from the environment act on the twins' epigenomes to activate and silence different genes. Diet, for example, is an environmental factor that can have an effect on the epigenome. Differences in physical activity can also cause epigenetic differences between the twins. Exposure to toxins can influence the epigenome. Stress also plays a role in shaping the epigenome. By the time the twins are well into adulthood, their epigenomes, thus gene expression patterns, are very different, making each twin unique.
Okay, so if we take a look here at these guys, and you have a picture of chromosome pairs, when you look at and compare 3-year-old twins, their epigenome looks exactly the same, or extremely similar, with their epigenetic tags being in the same place. Now, those same twins, 47 years later, excuse me, have green, you can see here in the red and green, where the twins' epigenetic tags are now in different places. So I am a proud mama of twins, and I feel like I wanted to share photos. So thank you for indulging me. They're actually not identical twins, but you know, I'm a little partial and they're cute and I love them. So I just wanted to share them with you. All right, so let's talk about epigenetics and disease development. We can use epigenetics in a positive way, right, to make positive changes in our genetic makeup for improved health. And here's how disease development might happen. We'll use cancer here as an example. So cancer is the overgrowth of abnormal cells. And these cancer cells have abnormal epigenomes. So they might have genetic tags, or epigenetic tags rather, that activate and promote cell growth. They also would have tags that have unstable chromosomes, so that highly active DNA is more likely to duplicate or delete. And they may have epigenetic tags that deactivate or turn down the genes that we want that keep cell growth in check, and also to repair DNA. So it's not just about having epigenetic tags that exponentially grow cells. It's also deactivating, turning off the genes that help keep the genetic growth in check and to help us repair our DNA. So how does epigenetic inheritance work? Well, the genome is passed, or DNA is passed from parents to their offspring, and from cells when they divide to the next generation. So we know that DNA replicates and passes to an embryo. With epigenomes and epigenetics, it's still, scientists used to think that the epigenome was completely erased from an embryo and then rebuilt starting from scratch with the child's experiences after it's born. We know now, or scientists think now, that that's not the case, that some tags actually from parents remain. So what does that really mean? That means that this is extremely important, because ultimately our behavior now and our exposure to the environment may actually affect our future generations if some of those epigenetic markers remain and are passed on. So back to our concept of interconnectedness and how interdependent everything is. We took a kind of high level overview of that as far as health and lifestyle factors earlier. Now, if we take a look at more within the gut health ecosystem, the things that kind of are overlap here are how healthy is our microbiome, right? How many good and how many varied strains of bacteria do we have? What do our genetics look like? What do our epigenes and genetic material looks like? What does our lifestyle look like? What type of environment do we live in? And these overlapping sections will sort of determine our health risk or our potential to improve our health. Now, as far as nutrition and epigenetic tags, how does this work? Okay, well, nutrients are found in food. And this goes back to our digestion. As part of the digestion process, these foods are broken down and the nutrients are pulled out and then absorbed into the body as needed. So what happens is the nutrients that are found in food are actually extracted through a certain metabolic methyl group making pathway. Now, you don't have to worry about the whole methyl group making, what that means. Just know that it goes through a specific method, a pathway. So when it is extracted, depending on that pathway, the nutritional content is actually changed, molded, and manipulated so the body can use it. And here, let's look at this little production line here. So there's some key nutrients that are going to make a very quick impact on our gene expression. So we've got a plate of spaghetti here, right? Nutrients that play a key role in this function are things like folic acid, B vitamins. Folic acid is a B vitamin. Choline. There's an over-the-counter supplement called SAM-E. So we've got vitamins. So we've put our spaghetti here through this little contraption, and it is now broken down. Now, what happens with these nutrients is that very quickly they can actually alter the gene expression, the epigenetic tags, especially early in life when that epigenome is just developing and growing. Here is a chart. I know there's lots of info on here, but on the left here, there's 2 rows. We have the nutrient here listed that is part of this very important process. So we've got methionine, folic acid, vitamin B12, B6, choline, the SAM-E that I had mentioned. We have betaine, resveratrol, which is an antioxidant, genistein, sulforaphane, butyrate, and PADS. So we don't really need to understand this epigenetic role and what happens as far as the science behind it. But if you take a look at the food origins here, these are recommended foods that help for us to develop good and positive and beneficial epigenetic markers. So, here's the thing. If you look at sunflower seeds, milk, fish, vegetables, nuts, other whole grain products, things like red wine, antioxidants, you can find those obviously in many other ways. These look a whole lot like what a wellness person or a nutritionist or a doctor might suggest that we incorporate into our diets. Now we kind of know why, right? Or partially why. All right, so as I mentioned, there's a lot of research going on. The epigenetic tags are not as simple to identify and map as one would think. So for example, when you think about one tag, it's not like scientists can look at that tag and look at that function and say, oh, this guy is responsible for, et cetera, et cetera. It's not that clear. What they've discovered is that there are groups of tags that might perform random or maybe not random, not so random functions that are part of or result in those epigenetic tags producing an effect, right? Whether it's positive or negative. So a lot of the studies are in understanding and trying to understand what happens. NIH has an institute called the National Human Genome Research Institute. And these are just examples. They have been divided into many different types of studies. So the mapping of cell types, we have genomic variation, we have the impact of genomic variation, we have genome technology, Human Genome Reference Program, which is kind of like an encyclopedia that you can kind of go back to and look at the different genomes that have been identified, and then the Encyclopedia of DNA Elements. So these are all really large-scale studies funded, and of course there are many more internationally. So let's kind of connect the dots here, since this is our class number 4. So we hear over and over that eating healthy foods is the best way to stay or get healthy. Here behind the belly button, let's take a look at the most general level, learning about digestive tract and nutrient absorption. Our very anatomy, the way that the digestive tract is designed is to break down that food into usable forms of energy and life-sustaining vitamins and minerals. And then we also see how these nutrients are absorbed and carried throughout the body to organs and other areas of the body that need them. And the takeaway here is that eating a variety of healthy food, including whole grains, healthy fat, plenty of fruits and vegetables, provide the nutrients and energy required for organ function. Next, we take a deeper dive, right? We explore this vessel that we have, this real estate of trillions of bacteria and parasites, and they play an integral role in our emotional well-being and our physical well-being. So essentially, we see how nutrients in food create a healthy gut ecosystem. Certain foods contain prebiotics, which promote the growth of good bacteria, and certain foods actually contain good bacteria, the probiotics. And a poor diet will result in an unbalanced microbiome, which is connected to disease. So we also, of course, have covered now DNA, genetic makeup that is contained within this ecosystem. So an additional layer to this bacterial environment is the idea of our DNA footprint being expressed in different ways based on, again, the lifestyle factors that we have. So that even if we are genetically predisposed or have certain elements in our DNA that might predispose us to certain conditions, we can, to a certain degree, depending on these factors, turn these epigenetic tags on or off. And again, we're talking about nutrition and lifestyle factors. So even further, as we connect the dots, I think it's important to understand that there's similar concept woven through every single stage here. And ultimately, our takeaway is we really do have more control than we think in terms of our choices, in terms of how we choose to live and the choices that we make. And our health and overall emotional health, which is so important. And really, ultimately, what that comes down to is the quality of life that we lead. And I really hope that you have found this class informative, and maybe it inspires you to make some healthy tweaks in your lifestyle. And these changes, they don't have to be huge. They can start out really small. I don't recommend a huge overhaul all at one time. Maybe you choose a food that contains probiotics that you don't normally eat, that we know tag good genes, or maybe you eat more foods high in fiber or more fermented foods. So again, these lifestyle changes can be really, really small and can still make a positive impact overall. So I thank you for joining me, and I will open it up to questions. If you have, feel free to put them in the chat.